but I'm more encouraged by some of the individuals that I've met here this evening. I have not had the opportunity yet to meet all of you, but I'm encouraged by the ones that I have met and the attitude and the approach, because to me, that is ultimately what's going to define the success or failure of Northeast Ohio. So I appreciate the opportunity just to come, and while I've enjoyed speaking, I'm certainly looking forward to the interactive Q&A and dialogue to hear some of the perspectives and to learn things that I can take back from these new leaders to Youngstown, Ohio. So congratulations on all that you've done to arrive at this place in your life. Congratulations from doing well, but now the challenge is, in these very difficult economic times, is to go out and do good. Thank you very much.
Okay, today at the City Club of Cleveland, you are listening to a special program featuring the Honorable Jay Williams, Mayor of Youngstown. Now we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from anyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is, representing new leaders, it's Jim Dixon. Jim over there in the back there. Now, our first question, please.
Mayor, would you share with us the cause of you deciding to get into the government sector of our society rather than private? And also, at what point in your life was that decision or interest created?
Certainly. The interest, let me answer the second part. I think the interest was created as a junior in high school. I had the opportunity to participate in a National Congressional Youth Leadership Conference that took us to Washington, D.C., and with a group of juniors from across the country, and it sort of sparked my interest in public service, but it lay dormant for a number of years. I actually started in the private sector and was working in banking for a number of years and was doing lending and community development work, and that inspired me to want to become more involved in public service. And actually, it was a few years working here in Cleveland at the Federal Reserve that ultimately really piqued my interest in community development activities. So I left the bank and began working for the city, first as community development director. And actually, it was this process, this Youngstown 2010 process that I was involved in, that inspired me to ultimately run for office. I had no real political aspirations, although I wanted to work in public service. I didn't necessarily seek elected office, but after going through the community and talking to so many people and being inspired myself about people who were inspired about their future, their community, it just so happened that a mayoral election was about to occur. I was a political neophyte, and some would still call me a political neophyte, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. And then ultimately decided to run for mayor and sought to be elected and was successful. So that's where it started, was certainly a high school trip, but ultimately it was just being inspired literally by people who were excited about the prospect of really redefining and being a part of a different future for the city of Youngstown.
Good evening. I really want to thank you for enlightening us about that process, because I think that's important. We've that social coming together of the community, actually understanding their issues and what needs to happen, I think is significantly important. But beyond that, I'm concerned more or less about the region that you're in, and you referred to that that whole region. And what is the response from the surrounding communities with regard to a process of possible growth and development of a regional concept of government? Is that a positive or negative?
It's been very challenging. While the general concept of improving the region is very well embraced and widely embraced, as they say, the devil is always in the details. It's a good idea until it means I have to change the way I do things. It's a good idea until it means that, well, perhaps the way I'm used to living life or governing my own self is going to be put under scrutiny. While we've been pushing regional collaboration, I can tell you that there are some in the surrounding suburban communities. When I ran for mayor, I had a lot of support from the surrounding suburban communities, and still do to a certain extent, but it was great because the notion was, hey, just stay inside of Youngstown and fix Youngstown. When I became mayor and said, well, hey, fixing Youngstown is going to involve all of us and is going to involve us sharing a little pain, then all of a sudden the excitement seemed to tail off. I can tell you that there are a number of people in the region who understand that as goes the central city, so goes the rest of the region. As goes Youngstown, so goes the Mahoney Valley. As goes Cleveland, so goes Northeast Ohio. So there are a number of different initiatives, and one of them is being put forward by the Mayors and Managers Association, Mayor Bill Curran out of Hudson, Ohio, who is leading the charge to make sure people recognize and begin to embrace that regional collaboration is not just a nice thing to do, it is going to be necessary for survival. So, to summarize, there are some people who hold on to this very narrow-minded parochial focus. They've got their head buried in the sand, and you're never going to convince them. But more and more, I think people are recognizing that we have to embrace some sort of regional collaboration. Doesn't mean regionalism, that we have to have one governing structure or one school district, but it does mean that the days of defining ourselves by these artificial boundaries are over. So it is yet a work in progress, and in the Mahoney Valley, it depends on who you ask whether I'm innovative or the worst thing that ever happened to the community.
Mayor Williams, with respect to the shrinking process itself, what are you doing proactively to manage that process, and what are your particular successes and challenges that you're experiencing?
One of the things that we actually did is once we implemented the plan, we had developers throughout the years who were still investing in Youngstown and building and investing in development and real estate in Youngstown, but they were doing it just where it was most convenient, not necessarily where it was most productive. We had a number of housing units being built for our low-income citizens, which we certainly supported and embraced. But what we found is developers were purchasing lots wherever they were the cheapest and they can get them the quickest. Oftentimes, that led to housing units being developed in areas of the city where they just weren't sustainable. And we said, well, you're not doing anyone a favor by building a housing unit in an area that just has no amenities, that is poorly serviced and is poorly accessible. So one of the successes is we've been able to get the developers to understand that we're no longer going to provide city financing to residential development that isn't consistent with our plan. We've also had some success with respect to our economic development ventures. We've been very much able to focus our limited resources in acquiring sites within the city that are very attractive to investors and economic development professionals to help expand the city's tax base. That's been a success. We've also had some success in our neighborhood development in terms of our demolition programs, really cleaning up the neighborhoods and trying to remove some of the slum and blight. Where we've had still challenges is the fact that the city was laid out to accommodate 250,000 people, so there is a litany of excess infrastructure, more than we could ever begin to deal with in the short term. So it's been very challenging because we are not going to force anyone to relocate, any of our citizens to relocate to another part of the city, even though it may be more sustainable, more densely populated. So the challenge has been to continue to serve those citizens on the fringes of the city or in areas of the city where the population has just declined precipitously. And the challenge has been, how do we continue to sustain the cost or maintain the cost of this infrastructure as the tax base has decreased? Part of the response, and it was not necessarily what we wanted to do, and this was prior to me becoming mayor, that the city's income tax was raised by 50 basis points. But again, that was only a stopgap measure because as the economics of the area continued to suffer, you can only raise the income tax so much to maintain that infrastructure. So that's been a challenge. And again, we've also had a challenge in convincing other communities in the region that is in their best interest to cooperate to see Youngstown prosper, because ultimately their fate is inextricably tied to the fate of the central city.
Mr. Mayor, could you speak about the Youngstown Business Incubator that you guys have developed? And specifically what I'm looking for is, what groups did you get to collaborate and how is it doing currently?
The Youngstown Business Incubator is a high technology incubator in downtown Youngstown that is the anchor of what in the next probably 18 months will be a technology block in downtown Youngstown. And had you talked about Youngstown and technology 10 years ago, people would have scoffed. This is a group, and the city is partnered, but I want to make sure that I'm crediting Jim Kostler and the staff of the Youngstown Business Incubator, who sought after a grant from the state of Ohio. It was under the Edison Grant Program. And through that, they've been able to leverage those dollars. I think it started with a $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 investment. They've been able to leverage that investment and attract private investment tenfold. The Youngstown Business Incubator is probably the best example of the future of the Youngstown area and the Mahoney Valley as it relates to how diverse our economy is going to be.